What we'll do is we'll go forward on the discussion about emotions that I promised last night. So we'll do that. So remember last night we started talking about God being outside of yourself and outside of the universe, in fact. Right? And God having masculine and feminine qualities, but there were two other qualities that God has. What were those? Truth. So I call them divine. So divine love and divine truth. Is divine truth black and white?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No.
God's truth is certainly absolute. So what?
No, God's love is absolute. Truth isn't.
Truth isn't absolute.
No.
That's
That's how cultists start. By saying truth is absolute and I've got it and you don't. Divides people instead of uniting people. Love unites people.
Well, I'm going to present that truth is absolute.
Okay. Yeah, I hear last time.
So,
Thank you.
and any truth I have is relative. So any person on earth who says that their truth is absolute is obviously in error.
Amen.
Okay?
Amen.
So, but God does have the absolute truth.
All right, I agree with that.
Okay. So
We're on the same page.
are the same. And my truth is my truth is relative. So at any time, I can progress in truth towards the absolute truth. So there will be people on earth and also in the spirit world who have more truth, in the sense of more of God's truth, than other people do. And that's a natural occurrence when you think about it. Just like in the field of physics, for example, there are some of the different people involved in that kind of area of science that obviously have more truth than other areas. It just depends, doesn't it, on what they have experienced in many cases. So God has absolute truth and God has her love, her divine love. Remember yesterday we went through the incarnation process where God created children, yeah? And the children incarnated by doing what? By dividing into two different forms. Remember there were two bodies attached at the incarnation process? Spirit and material bodies. Spirit body and material body. And here, spirit body, material body. But the real you is your soul, or in fact, you are one half of the soul. And the other half of your soul is out there somewhere. Yeah? Or might be irritating you something.
What is the rhyme and reason behind this split in the soul?
And the aspect of sexuality or gender is a very, very important aspect in all of God's creations. And it's very, very important for all men to finish up coming to understand women. And it's very important for all women to finish up coming to understand men. You see? And often, as we know on earth today, there is a large problem between men and women generally. There's a sort of like almost a gender battle. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of sort of thinking, right? Sorry? It is in a way, right? What eventually needs to happen, and the beauty of what our Father has done, is that He's created this system in which we can actually learn as much about ourselves as possible, but also learn as much about the other as possible, so much so that eventually the two halves combine again. And so it's actually a perfect way to address all of the issues of gender imbalance. Does that make sense? So that's one of the reasons for it. Another is that once that soul is completely united, It is complete in itself. It doesn't need anything else. So it doesn't need a mother, it doesn't need a father. Aside from God, it doesn't need a mother who was on earth, or a father on earth, or a sister or a brother. It doesn't need any of those things. It can survive in a perfectly blissful state without needing other transactions if it doesn't want them. So every transaction then becomes a transaction motivated by the gift of love rather than a need that we're projecting onto somebody else. Yeah. And so this actually addresses many, many things when you think about it as to what the problems are when we go down this track of separation between the male and female. When you think about it in your own life, how many of your deep emotional issues have been related to the opposite sex? There's usually quite a lot, right?
Alright, homosexuality then, with the male, split or the female.
Yes.
Can you just address that a little bit more?
Well, this is, if you talk to homosexuals and spend time with them, you will see that they have a far more balance usually between the masculine and the feminine. Well, and the same goes with the lesbian couples. They generally have a far better balance between the masculine and feminine, particularly if they haven't been injured. And so that's why a lot of women find spending time with a homosexual man easier than they do spending time with a man who's not gay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because a lot of times they have a much closer feeling within themselves of an evenness within that part of it, within the soul. So and it's for that reason, like the Apostle John's soul, for example, is a gay soul. So his partner when on earth was a man as well as him being a man. And as that occurs, one of the things that you'll notice, and in time many of you may meet John, even though he has passed, he will materialise in a form and you'll meet him. You will see how evenly balanced a lot of the masculine and feminine qualities are within him as a person, but particularly within his soulmate couple as well. And you will see just why a lot of times gay couples, both men gay couples and women gay couples, usually have an easier time working through gender imbalances. So in a lot of ways, they find it a bit easier than to actually accept each other than couples who are so-called straight, right? Who often have a lot of gender imbalance issues due to usually their parents and what's going on between their parents. And also culturally. You think of some cultures like the Vietnamese culture, for example. If you're a woman in the Vietnamese culture, there's no law preventing you from being murdered from your husband, for example. Right now in the Vietnamese culture. You can actually be murdered and nobody will take any action if you were murdered by your husband. Now why is that? Well, obviously there's a huge feeling by the men in that culture that women are subclass. Does that make sense? You see this in many other cultures around the world at the moment too, don't you? Where the women are a lot treated like they are subclass, like the men are dominant and the women are treated like they're less.
Do we have a choice as to which sex we are going to be and where we're going to live? Like, for instance, who would sign up to be that woman who could be murdered? Is that by choice, or how does that work?
We don't have a choice about what sex we are going to be, because the heart of the soul always splits in the same way. Does that make sense? So the masculine, in the case of a male-female soul, the half of the soul that's masculine will always split into a masculine form, so into a male body. And the half of the soul that's female will always split into a female form. Now the reason why there's a lot of disagreement with that today is that there's a lot of mediumistic type people who are receiving images from spirits that play through issues of being a man. For example, you may be a female and very mediumistic and be receiving images and thoughts and feelings that seem to be a masculine experience. And what that actually is a male spirit attached to you who wants to give you certain feelings and thoughts and so forth. Right? And once you start talking to that spirit as if they're a spirit, rather than thinking it is your previous life, you will find you'll be able to deal with the issues a lot better. Rather than, so any time you receive impressions, particularly opposite sex impressions, they are certainly spirits who are giving you those impressions. And you need to enter discussions with them about that. And they're there for a reason. They're there because of the law of attraction between yourself and them in terms of the emotions. Does that make sense?
Yes. The other half of the question is, how did I luck out to be a white woman in the United States instead of being a sub-level Vietnamese woman?
A lot of the processes that God made are mathematical in nature. And so a lot of the instinctual process of the incarnation is actually a mathematical process as well. And so there are mathematical laws. You've all heard of chaos theory and those kinds of theories. They are actually mathematical principles that apply even in the process of incarnation. So a lot of the things God has made are actually mathematical processes rather than you choosing to come here and somebody else choosing to go there. Because as you say, nobody would choose to die by the age of 5, generally, would they? Like, you know, and yet 50 million children every year die by the age of 5 through malnutrition. Right? Nobody would choose to, as a woman, would choose to go to a country where women are treated second class. But there are like literally hundreds of millions of women currently, right now, being treated that way. So obviously, there's other processes involved in the incarnation process besides choice. Everyone wants to, I find it interesting because most people in the Western world and also in many Eastern philosophies want there to be choice. And that way they can justify sometimes the treatment, the bad treatment of others. To give you an example, in India, for example, many of you would have heard of the caste system in India. And the reason why the untouchables are treated like they are is because most people around them feel that in a previous life they made bad choices. And it's the law of karma that created them being an untouchable now. And that justifies me not being an untouchable, treating an untouchable in a poor, as if they are like lesser than myself. Does that make sense? So a lot of the theories surrounding reincarnation are actually justifications for a lack of love. Right? So you need to look at those theories very much. Every time you see something that's a lack of love is involved, then you've got to be very, very careful about accepting those theories because they're probably wrong.
Now that seems a little unlikely. So am I understanding this right? Are you saying God chose that person to have that unfair life that I would call it?
No, I'm saying the parents' longing. Remember last night we talked about the parents' longings and how the parents need a child of a certain personality to trigger their emotions. It's actually the parents' longings that create the law of attraction in those situations, not the child's. So the child has a certain personality, remember, that's instinctual. They have certain instinct to incarnate, and that is a mathematical process of incarnation, but it's very much guided by the soul longing of the parents. So it's the parents' longings that create that.
The last couple of years, I'm hearing that we have up to we're in 6 places at the same time.